It was late in the summer of 1973, and the Tonight Show studio buzzed with the same warm energy that had carried it through a decade of laughter, charm, and America's favorite late-night rituals. Johnny Carson sat behind his iconic desk, cue cards in hand, ready to introduce his next guest. The audience, alive with anticipation, didn't yet realize they were about to witness one of the most unplanned and powerful moments in television history, a conversation between two icons that would silence the laughter, still the applause, and touch something far deeper in the American soul. Johnny Carson was the face of calm confidence, the everyman's wit, the kind of host who made even the most famous stars feel like old friends. But that night, as he prepared to welcome the greatest boxer who ever lived, something unexpected was about to happen. Something real, raw, and unscripted. When Muhammad Ali stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere shifted instantly. He was larger than life physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Dressed in a sharp suit, with that unmistakable gleam in his eye, he waved to the crowd with the confidence of a man who had stood toe-to-toe with history itself. The band struck a triumphant note. The audience roared. Carson stood to greet him, shaking his hand with that signature half grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny announced, "the one and only, the greatest, Mr. Muhammad Ali." Ali took his seat, leaned back, and looked around the studio as if measuring its energy. He was no stranger to television. He'd been on dozens of shows, interviews, debates, news panels, but this one felt different. Perhaps it was Carson's aura, the way Johnny could disarm a guest with humor, then slip in a question that cut straight to the heart. They began light, trading jokes about boxing and fame. Ali teased Carson for being too clean to ever survive in the ring. Carson shot back that Ali was too talkative to dodge a punch. The crowd laughed, and for a few minutes, it was the usual Tonight Show charm. But then Carson, always the craftsman of tone, leaned forward. He said, "Ali, you've had the whole world cheering for you and booing you. You've been called a champion and a troublemaker, sometimes in the same breath. Do you ever think about how history will remember you?" The question hung in the air. Ali looked at Carson for a long moment, his expression softening. The audience sensed it too. Something was shifting. Gone was the playful swagger. What emerged was something few had ever seen on live television. Muhammad Ali, stripped of bravado, speaking from the deepest parts of his soul. Ali leaned toward the microphone and said quietly, "You know, Johnny, one day all this fame, the crowds, the money, it's all going to be gone. I won't be able to fight forever. And when I'm gone, I don't want people to remember me just for what I did in the ring. I want them to remember me for what I stood for." The studio fell completely silent. Even Carson, the man who could fill any silence with a joke, didn't say a word. Ali continued, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I've been to places most folks never see. I've seen poverty, children hungry, people forgotten. I've seen hate up close. And I've learned something. It's not how many punches you throw, it's how many hearts you touch." He paused, then smiled faintly. "We all fight, Johnny. Some people fight wars, some fight sickness, some fight just to be heard. The real champion is the one who keeps fighting when no one's watching." In that moment, you could almost hear America breathing in unison. This wasn't the brash, loud Ali people had seen at weigh-ins or press conferences. This was a man revealing his truth to millions, live and unfiltered. Carson, ever the listener, looked moved, his hand resting on his chin, his eyes locked on Ali. He finally said, "That's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard on this show." The audience erupted, not with laughter, but with thunderous applause. But Ali wasn't finished. He turned to the crowd and said, "You laugh now, but one day you'll all have to answer one question. What good did I do for others?" It wasn't rehearsed, wasn't scripted, and it wasn't meant to entertain, it was meant to awaken. Even Johnny, who had interviewed presidents, astronauts, and legends, later admitted he'd never felt energy like that in the studio before. Behind the scenes, NBC executives whispered in awe. They'd expected a fun boxing interview, maybe some good-natured trash talk, not a sermon on purpose and humanity. Yet the next morning, that clip aired across the country, and 20 million people found themselves talking not about boxing, but about life, morality, and legacy. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Muhammad Ali's message silences late night," and "Carson moved by the greatest's words." Letters poured in from viewers who said they'd never been so touched by a late-night show. Teachers replayed the clip in classrooms. Churches quoted it in sermons. Ali's words echoed far beyond that stage. Years later, he would reference that night again, saying, "I wasn't trying to preach. I was just telling the truth as I saw it. Johnny asked the right question, and sometimes the truth answers louder than you plan. Carson himself, usually detached from emotion, mentioned the moment in a rare interview. I've had thousands of guests, but when Ali spoke that night, I stopped being a host and started being a student. What made that exchange so unforgettable wasn't just the fame of the men involved, it was the humanity that cut through the performance. Two titans of American culture, one who fought with his fists, one who fought with his wit, found common ground in vulnerability. It showed viewers that television could do more than entertain, it could enlighten. As the applause faded that night, Ali reached across the desk, shook Johnny's hand, and said, "Thank you for letting me say what was in my heart." Carson smiled softly and replied, "It was our privilege." The show closed with the band playing a subdued version of its theme, the audience still visibly moved. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, Johnny sat there for a moment, staring at the desk, as if replaying the words he'd just heard. In the years that followed, that interview became one of The Tonight Show's most replayed and studied moments. Scholars of media called it the night late-night television grew up. It wasn't comedy or controversy, it was clarity. Ali's message about purpose, faith, and compassion would resonate for generations. When Ali later battled Parkinson's disease, people revisited that clip and realized he'd predicted his own truth, that the measure of a person isn't in strength or fame, but in the love they leave behind. Today, in the endless sea of content, that moment stands as a time capsule of authenticity. No teleprompter, no performance, just a man who saw beyond himself, speaking to another who truly listened. The bond between Carson and Ali that night wasn't about celebrity, it was about shared humanity. They represented two sides of the American spirit, the dreamer and the challenger, and together, they gave us something timeless. When Johnny Carson passed away in 2005, tributes flooded the airwaves. One montage included that very clip, Carson's quiet awe, Ali's unwavering conviction, and the crowd's stunned silence. In that silence lived everything words couldn't express: respect, unity, truth. And perhaps that's why the story endures. Because in a world obsessed with noise, two men once reminded us of the power of listening. So when people ask what happened that night, the night Johnny Carson's Tonight Show stopped being entertainment and became enlightenment, the answer is simple. A man known for fighting the world laid down his gloves and spoke straight to its heart. Muhammad Ali reminded us that greatness isn't found in victory, but in virtue. And Johnny Carson, in that unplanned, unforgettable moment, did what great hosts do best. He gave greatness the space to speak.